morning. Today is March 14, 2022, regular session of the Sangguniang Bayan of Santa Ilocos Sur. Before we start with our regular session, I'd like to remind everyone to please put your phones in silent mode, put your masks on, and kindly observe all of the protocols so as not to disturb the proceedings of this regular session. This session is called to order. SBM Domingo Ritua will lead us in a prayer.
Let's all stand. Let us put ourselves in the holy presence of the Lord, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, we come to you today asking for your guidance, wisdom, and support as we begin this regular session. Help us to engage in meaningful discussion. Allow us to grow closer as a group and nurture welfare and betterment of our town and our fellow centennials. Fill us with your love and grace. We ask you to guide us always and keep in us the passion of commitment and value of public service. Continue to remind us that all we do today and all that we accomplish is for the pursuit of truth, for the greater glory of you, and for the service of our town. We ask these things in your name. Amen. In the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Panunumpa sa watawat ng Pilipinas. Ako ay Pilipino, buong katapatan nanunumpa sa watawat ng Pilipinas. Sa bansang kanyang sinasagisag, na may dangal, katarungan at kalayaan, nagkikilos ng sambayanan, makadiyos, makakalikasan, makatao at makabansa.
Secretary will call the roll.
Honorable Eugene B. Borges.
Present.
Honorable Domingo L. Ritua.
Present.
Honorable Belia G. Bello. Honorable Benedicto A. Borgoño.
Present, Madam Secretary.
Honorable Marino S. Burgos. Honorable Encarnita B. De La Cueva.
Present.
Honorable Reynold B. Queral. Honorable Clay Benedict P. Formoso.
Present.
Honorable Percival T. Carrion.
Present.
Honorable Justin Thea Benyo Melegrito.
Present.
We have a majority of the members present today. The only one who is absent today due to medical reasons is SBM Belia Bello. So we can proceed with our regular session. First is the reading and approval of the minutes of the previous session. The members had sufficient time to review the minutes of the previous session. If there are any corrections to be made on the minutes, please say so.
Mr. Presiding Officer.
The Liga ng Barangay President is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer. Motion to approve the previous minutes dated March 7, 2022 at 9:20 in the morning without correction, Mr. Presiding Officer.
Do I hear a second?
I second.
Mr.
Motion
Presiding
to be
Officer.
seconded. The motion to approve and adopt the minutes of the previous session is hereby approved. Next, we go to the privilege hour. Do we have any member of the Sangguniang Bayan who would like to take the floor to raise a matter of privilege? Hearing none, we can proceed then to the first reading and referral to the committees concerned of proposed ordinances, resolutions, readings of communications, petitions, messages, and memorials. First item, Madam Secretary.
A resolution endorsing the application of Mr. Lori Palomares of Sagsagat San Ildefonso, Ilocos Sur to operate commercial sand and gravel at Barangay Banawang, Santa Ilocos Sur.
The matter shall be referred to the Committee on Environment. Do you have a date in mind, SBM?
Presiding Officer. I can see items 2, 3, and 4 as referred to our committee. And if the members are amenable, the committee is setting the committee hearings on Wednesday at 9 o'clock in the morning, Mr. Presiding Officer.
Okay. The committee chairperson, SBM Borgoño, is requesting the members of the Committee on Environment to meet on Wednesday at 9:30, 9 o'clock in the morning to discuss items 2, 3, and 4. But I will have to refer items 3 and 4. Next, Madam Secretary.
A resolution endorsing the application of Ms. Concepcion Bueno of Barangay Bulala Norte, Vigan, Ilocos Sur to operate commercial sand and gravel at Barangay Nagpanawan, Santa Ilocos Sur.
The matter shall be referred to the Committee on Environment.
A resolution endorsing the application of Mr. Fidel Cacas of Barangay Margaay, Narvacan, Ilocos Sur to operate commercial sand and gravel at Basug, Santa Ilocos Sur.
The matter shall be referred to the Committee on Environment. Next item, Madam Sec. Do we have any other items for consideration of the Sangguniang Bayan, Madam Secretary?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
An ordinance creating the Paspas Ayuda para Pasada program, providing its funds, providing its guidelines, among others. Certified urgent by the Office of the Mayor.
We have here a proposed measure certified urgent by the Office of the Mayor. This pertains to the creation of the Paspas Ayuda para Pasada program intended to provide fuel subsidy to tricycle franchise holders and registered bangka owners in the municipality of Santa Ilocos Sur. The matter was properly discussed with the municipal mayor as to the intent and the source of funding for the proposed program. A copy was forwarded to our private chat group, and I assume that the municipal SB secretary also provided copies of the proposed measure to the members of the Sangguniang Bayan. There are revisions because a day after I finished the proposed measure, the draft, the municipal mayor decided to include the registered bangka owners also. So there are some minor revisions on the proposed measure. The matter being certified urgent by the Office of the Mayor, and to give sufficient time or to give opportunity for the members of the Sangguniang Bayan to raise their questions, which shall constitute the second reading of the proposed measure, I am temporarily suspending our rules to accommodate our resource persons who are here today. We have here the STODA President, Mr. Botacion, and I think we have a representative from our from Yuri Gas Station. So rules suspended. Okay nga rin po. Ada kaya tayong adamagan? Tapno malawlawan ni Apo Presidente, okay kan Apo Mayoran yan ay lawlawag kanyanan. DJ launan ti ordinansa. Adu nga min damdamag pay no cash wenno gaslip timayted. Timayted Apo ket gaslip niya tapno nadardaras DJ panaka liquidate na pay. DJ gaslip to ngamin ison tumot lang iti mausar nga attachment para di liquidation report niya. Ta sigurado nga no agdamag to iti COA no naawat metlaeng dagi beneficiaryo DJ gas subsidy program adda may pakita nga insigida ti opisina ti mayor. Regarding DJ source of fund na, the mayor graciously approved the earmarking of 300 to 350,000 of his fuel fund, the fuel fund of the Office of the Mayor. So there's no awan ti mapektaran nga programa or serbisyo dito'y maimplementar nga programa tayo nga mangted ti subsidiya. So kahit tayo nga damagan man Apo, tapno ustumat lang din yung aramid to nga computation ken ni Madam that representative iti Yuri no manutatan iti magmag na nga presyo iti diesel. Diesel, ma'am.
Currently, sir, diesel kat 69.94.
60,
69.94, sir.
69.24,
94, sir.
94.
Yes, sir.
Unleaded,
Unleaded, sir, is 71.58. Super, 72.57.
okay. Ti total nga ito tayo, ti may isang franchise owner, kita 1,500. Dagiti in-approve ni Apo Mayor. Kasi di motivated ka dagiti registered bank owners. Gas slip ti mausar tapno kasi imposible nga may kargada iti 500 ti may isang nga kargaan niya. Iso nga maka gas slip ti mausar tanuan niya di masapol na ti may isang aldaw iso ti may lista kanya di gas slip nga maited kanyada. At the number na apo, the serial number na di maited, kaya kay surat ginaganan mismo na di franchise holder kaya di gas slip nga maited kanya na. Siyak pa iti mangilawlawagan, kas resulta iti panagpatpatang mi ka ni Apo Mayor, ti basis ti panangited iti subsidiya, ket di prangkisa, wano di registration, di prangkisa ti tricycle, wano registration iti bangka. Kahit nasawin, no di may isa kuma nga taga-santa, ket talo iti prangkisa na, because by virtue of the franchise, ket talo mat iti, maited kanya na nga gas slip. Taad da nga minjab duma nga taga-santansa, nga duwa iti franchise da, tano coding di may isa nga tricycle da, di may isa ti di may isa nga tricycle na nga da prangkisa na iti usarin namanen nga agpasada. Ya. Adda kaya tayo nga damagan apo, uno ilawlawag ka ni Apo Presidente Tistoda. Adda kayat mo nga damagan, sir?
Nawagan da kijay ko, sir. Dado mga membro no mabalinda nga kano gulpien ket idi sungbat tinsungbat ko ket dependento jay ko ni Apo Mayor ko.
Nung gulpian da, gaputang nga ta nalaklaka iti gasolina tanya. Nalaklaka. Awang kami ti seguridad na. No baka no bigat ket gumatuman ti presyon ket mawatak na jay nga kapanunutan dagiti stoda. Ket kayat da nga mangaladal tati galundan ket kasla alaan da sigida jay 1,500 worth of gasolina da. Awang problema. Option da dayjay, decision da dayjay. Basta ti importante makonsumo da, kan nagpatingga ti makonsumo da, di gatad nga 1,500. Tatati issue akit no adda sufficiente nga supply iti gasolinaan. Tapno may tanda dayjay nga volume iti crudo, uno petrolyo nga kasapulan ti may isang franchise holder. Mas importante, adda niya na pirmaan, na-receive na di gas slip, no usaran da di 1,500 gain sigida, awang problema. Basta napirmaan, ken adda available nga supply di gasolinaan. Manipod iti teori, adda kayat yung adamagan, o na iklaro, ma'am? Next to ni Apo Sanggunian Marino Burgos.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer.
Malpas ni ma'am, ni to Sanggunian Marino.
Sir, kahit ko lang ko ma-clarify no kasano ti mode of payment nan today, Jai, sir.
Yung mode of payment na kaslamat lang ang JR Aramidan tayo with the Office of the Mayor. So, dahil detalye nanton kat we will discuss with the budget officer kani GSO.
Okay.
So, importante dahil gas slip nga
Yes, sir.
nga maidulin kan maalan tumet lang iti munisipyo. Yes, Sanggunian Marino.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer. Well, is it not possible for the other gasoline stations to also be included in this IODA program of the local government unit?
Correct, Apo Sangguniang Marino. That's why one of the provisions contained in uh, Section 5 of the proposed measure, paragraph 2, line 60 to line 62, line 60 to 62, the municipal mayor is also hereby authorized to enter into a memorandum of agreement with the owners and or management of any gasoline stations in the locality. So we're giving authority to the municipal mayor to enter into memorandum of agreements with other gasoline stations in the municipality, just in case they can offer a much lower pricing for diesel or other fuel. No? But as of now, I was informed by our GSO. The only contract I think between the LGU is with Yuri. No? That's the only contract I think that we have right now. But of course, as you mentioned, we will not limit for a more efficient or effective implementation of the program. We're giving authority to the municipal mayor to enter into a memorandum of agreement with other gasoline stations. Shall we read by section the proposed measure? Page 2, palikado nyo lang. Back to back up po. Nagtipid ako sa papel. No? Okay. Okay. Since this will constitute the first reading and the second reading of the proposed measure, no? If you have any questions, just manifest your questions, no? So an ordinance creating the Paspas Ayuda para Pasada program, providing its funds, guidelines, among others. Whereas the current geopolitical crisis has resulted in an unabated hike in fuel prices in the recent weeks that may further increase due to the uncertainty of events and the absence of remedial policies imposed by the national government. Whereas the national government has yet to implement the Pantawid Pasada program for the affected public transport operators, and with the minimal budget allocation for the program, the amount may be insufficient to provide aid to our local tricycle drivers or bangka operators. Whereas the restrictions imposed on tricycle operations during the height of the pandemic, made worse by the fuel hikes, made the economic recovery of drivers and operators more difficult. Whereas the LGU Santa does not want the passengers to suffer the burden of possible fare hikes brought about by the fuel price increases. Whereas the municipal budget officer certifies the availability of funds from the office of the mayor, and the proposed realignment of the said fund was approved by the municipal mayor. Whereas Republic Act 7160 provides the authority to local government units to exercise powers expressly and impliedly granted to promote the general welfare of its inhabitants, which includes but is not limited to enhancement of economic prosperity and social justice, promotion of full employment of the residents, and preservation of the comfort and convenience of the inhabitants. Now therefore be it ordained by the Sangguniang Bayan of Santa Ilocos Sur in session duly assembled, that's Section 1, short title. This ordinance is called and may be cited as the Paspas Ayuda para Pasada Ordinance of 2022, or PAPA Ordinance. Questions? None. Section 2, Statement of Policy. The LGU Santa, through this ordinance, affirms its constitutional and statutory duty to promote the general welfare of the people and shall ensure and support, among other things, the enhancement of economic prosperity and social justice, the promotion, kindly correct that, promotion of full employment of the residents, and preservation of the comfort and convenience of all Santanians. Questions on Section 2? None? We proceed to Section 3. Section 3, Paspas Ayuda para Pasada Program. The Paspas Ayuda para Pasada, PAPA program, is hereby created as an emergency fuel assistance program for the tricycle franchise holders, kindly insert, and registered bangka owners of the municipality of Santa Ilocos Sur. The PAPA program shall be a temporary measure intended to protect the tricycle franchise holders and registered bangka owners of Santa Ilocos Sur from the unabated rise of fuel prices and shall likewise prevent the possible increase of tricycle fare rates in the locality. Any questions on Section 3?
Mr. Presiding Officer.
Sangguniang Bayan Member Borgonyo, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer. May we just ask Mr. Presiding Officer, as of this date, how many of our franchises have
Okay.
already
Madam Secretary, how many franchise holders?
We have 213, sir.
213.
13. Yes.
213.
Yes.
So there's an increase from the initial report.
just a follow-up question,
Yes,
Mr. Presiding
Sangguniang Bayan.
Officer. Since we have extended their application for permit until March 31, Mr. Presiding Officer, may I know if we will also accommodate those franchisers beyond that date, Mr. Presiding Officer?
Unless the Sangguniang Bayan will further approve or pass an ordinance extending the period of registration or registration of tricycle franchises, no? I cannot give an answer to your question. No? But there's no problem as to the funding, because the only funding that the only fund source that we're going to use, or the mayor will allow to use, is the fuel fund of the office of the mayor. So just in case within the period originally extended by the Sangguniang Bayan, no, as the period of the tricycle franchise renewal and registration, there would be additional registrants. No? With the office of the mayor has sufficient fund, no, to do that. No, has sufficient fund to accommodate, no,
Thank you.
the new registrants.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer.
But as to new registrants after the period of extension, I cannot answer that, no, unless the Sangguniang Bayan will extend. But I believe we have reached the possible number of tricycle franchises already in Santa. No? So there's no cause of concern, no, for your unserved or possible unserved registrants. Okay. Section 4, funding and appropriation. The funding requirement needed for the implementation of this program shall be sourced from the available fuel fund under the office of the mayor and from other local sources that are available. Questions on Section 4? Section 5, implementation of the program. In coordination with the Santa Tricycle Operators and Drivers Association, or STODA, and other stakeholders, the municipal mayor may issue the necessary guidelines to implement this program. The municipal mayor is also hereby authorized to enter into a memorandum of agreement with the owners and/or management of any gasoline stations in the locality. Should there be an urgent need to continue the program, the municipal mayor shall likewise have the authority to continue the program without the need for further authority from the Sangguniang Bayan of Santa Ilocos Sur, subject to the availability of local funds. However, said authority shall automatically cease upon the stabilization of market prices. Like I mentioned a while ago, this is an emergency measure. So once the emergency ceases to exist, then the authority given to the mayor to implement this emergency fuel subsidy program shall automatically cease. No? Question on Section 5? None. Section 6, separability clause. Should any provision in this ordinance be declared unconstitutional by any competent court, the remaining provisions shall remain valid and legal. Section 7, repealing clause. Any ordinance, rules, and regulations and executive issuances found inconsistent with the provisions of this ordinance are hereby repealed or modified accordingly. Section 8, effectivity. This ordinance shall take effect immediately upon its approval. No questions or manifestations on the proposed measure. Do we have any questions for our resource persons, which I think were properly apprised with the proposed measure already? Hearing none, if there is no objection, I would like to resume our session then. What's the pleasure of the Sangguniang Bayan regarding the measure certified urgent by the Office of the Mayor, the proposed measure Papa Ordinance?
Mr. Presiding Officer, may I have the floor, Mr. Presiding Officer.
Sangguniang Bayan Member Ritwa, you are recognized.
Since the proposed measure is urgent, Mr. Presiding Officer, and it's already in the second reading, Mr. Presiding Officer, I move for the approval of the proposed measure and to be calendar for third reading. And there's no amendment of the title, Mr. Presiding Officer, either for the approval for the third and final reading, Mr. Presiding Officer.
There's a motion from Sangguniang Bayan Ritwa. Yes, Sangguniang Bayan, before I rule on that, Sangguniang Bayan Member Burgos.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer. Well, the proposed legislative measure is well crafted, and its enactment is very timely, especially during this time wherein our tricycle drivers or operators are the most affected during this COVID-19 pandemic. But with the indulgence of our good presiding officer and author of this proposed measure, may I offer an amendment on the title, and the title should read, an ordinance creating the Paspas Ayuda para Pasada program, appropriating funds thereof, and guidelines for implementation, among others. Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer.
Well noted. There's a motion from Sangguniang Bayan Member Burgos to amend the title of the proposed measure. Do I hear a second?
Second, Mr. Presiding Officer.
Okay. So, following going back to the original motion of Sangguniang Bayan Ritwa for the immediate passage of the proposed measure, do I hear a second?
Second, Mr.
The
President.
motion duly seconded by show of hands. Kindly raise your hands, those who approve the passage of the proposed measure. All members of the Sangguniang Bayan raise their hands, signifying their approval and support for the proposed measure. The proposed measure is hereby approved. I'd like to thank the STODA President, Sir Botacion, and the representative from Yuri Gasoline Station for their attendance today. If you can still wait for a while, we'll finish the session and I will meet you at the Office of the Mayor to discuss the implementation. I believe that the gas slips were already printed by the staff of the Office of the Mayor. So upon the approval and upon the passage, upon the printing and signing of the proposed measure by the Sangguniang Bayan members of Santa and approval of the municipal mayor, perhaps we can proceed with the implementation or the release of the gas slips today or tomorrow. So, thank you very much, ma'am, sir. Okay. Do we have any other items for consideration of the Sangguniang Bayan, Madam Secretary? No more? Okay. We can proceed then to the presentation of committee reports. We have 3 committee reports to be presented today. The first item shall be presented by the Committee on Environment. Sangguniang
You have the
Bayan
floor,
Member
Mr.
Borgonyo,
President.
you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer. March 14, 2022, committee report submitted by the Committee on the Protection of Environment and Natural Resources, the subject of which is the endorsement for the renewal of the application of Ms. Josephine Piano of Barangay Paing, Bantay, Ilocos Sur, for a provisionary permit to operate commercial sand and gravel at Barangay Basog, Santa, Ilocos Sur. To the Honorable Presiding Officer, Sangguniang Bayan, Santa, Ilocos Sur, the Committee on Environment and Natural Resources, to which was referred to on the above-mentioned legislative measure, has considered the same and has conducted the committee hearing on March 9, 2022 at 8:30 in the morning at the Sangguniang Bayan Hall with the presence of the members of the committee, Ms. Josephine Piano, permittee, Mr. Yoler Bueno, Penro representative, Mr. Ruel Billones, representative from MPDO. The Committee on the Protection of Environment and Natural Resources examined and reviewed the application and the attached documents submitted by the applicant. The committee has the honor, therefore, to report it back to this august body with the following findings and recommendations to it. 1. The provincial permit from the Office of the Governor has expired and the permittee was required an SB resolution and barangay resolution for the renewal of their application for a provisional permit. Secondly, clearance was issued by the Office of the Mayor, certifying that the office has no objection for the application and that the quarry area applied by Ms. Piano does not conflict or overlap with other permitted quarry areas which are adjacent to the said applied quarry area. Thirdly, copies of the application letter, barangay resolution, location plan, the sketch plan, and the program of work were submitted. Hence, Mr. Presiding Officer, this committee recommends for the adoption and approval of this committee report. And for the, since this proposed measure is an endorsement renewing an application for a provisional permit, I move for the approval of this proposed measure without passing the second and third reading, Mr. Presiding Officer.
I second the motion, Mr. Presiding Officer.
Any other discussion? No? The motion of Sangguniang Bayan Member Borgonio to approve the committee report and that the proposed measure be approved without passing the third reading is hereby approved.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer.
Next. Item number 2. This pertains to the proposed measure which I sponsored, the ordinance creating the Municipal Youth Development Fund, appropriating funds therefore, and providing the guidelines for its utilization and for other purposes. The PPSK President is recognized.
Thank you, sir. March 11, 2022, Committee Report, submitted by Committee on Youth and Sports Development and Committee on Appropriation. Subject, an ordinance creating the Municipal Youth Development Fund, providing the guidelines for its utilization and for other purposes. To the Presiding Officer and the Honorable Members of Sangguniang Bayan of Santa. The aforesaid subject has been referred to the Joint Committee on Youth and Sports Development and Committee on Appropriation. After a committee hearing conducted on the aforementioned subject proposed legislation on March 9, 2022, 9:30 a.m. at SB Hall with the presence of the invited resource persons, namely, Budget Officer Ms. Jelly Alagadan, Municipal Accountant Mr. Ivan Adviento, Municipal Social Welfare Officer Ms. Genevieve Balbuena, and Local Civil Registrar Officer Mr. Rodney Pintor. Hereunder are the following findings and recommendations to wit. Findings. The joint committees considered the vital role of youth in nation building, hence the importance and necessity of the enactment of the proposed legislation. The resource persons in attendance certified as to the availability of funds for its initial implementation, and the regular funding of 1% shall be included in the 2023 annual budget. Thereafter, they, however, recommended a cross-matching of projects of the different offices in the LGU to avoid duplication or redundancy. Recommendation: the joint committees respectfully recommending for the approval and adoption of the committee report and the proposed legislation to be calendared for its second reading. Submitted by Committee on Youth and Sports Development and Committee on Appropriations. Mr. Presiding Officer, May I move for the adoption and approval of this committee report and for the proposed legislative measure to be calendared for its second reading.
Motion duly seconded. The committee report is hereby adopted and approved, and the proposed measure calendared for its second reading. Next,
Mr. Presiding Officer.
Sangguniang Bayan Member De La Cueva, you are recognized.
Thank you, sir. Committee report submitted by the Committee on Education. Subject, a resolution favorably endorsing the application of Santa High School Incorporated for the face-to-face learning. To the Presiding Officer and the honorable members of the Sangguniang Bayan of Santa. The Committee on Education, to which was referred to on the above-mentioned legislative measure, conducted a committee hearing on March 2022 at 9:30 in the morning at the Sangguniang Bayan Hall with the presence of the most of the members of the committee, Ms. Marilo De Castro and Ms. Cecilia Adviento, representative from the Santa High School Incorporated. The Committee on Education has the honor to report it back to this august body with the following findings and recommendations to it. Findings: all their students aged 13 years old and above, and all the school teachers were already vaccinated. The following shall be implemented during the limited face-to-face modality. Time in school, 7:30 to 11:40 a.m. session. And 1 to 4 p.m. session. A number of learners, maximum of 20 learners for a.m. and p.m. sessions. The school did not install barriers since it is optional and due to limited funding, and it is not a mandatory requirement in the implementation of the limited face-to-face learning modality, but there were signages marks installed to observe the 1 meter apart guidelines. The Sangguniang Bayan resolution supporting the application of Santa High School Incorporated for the limited face-to-face learning modality is just one of the requirements, which will be submitted to the Regional DepEd Office. It is the DepEd Regional Office that will approve the application on the school, provided that they have complied with the standards set forth under relevant issuances. Recommendation: in view of the foregoing, the committee recommends for the adoption and approval of the report for the passage of the proposed legislative measure without passing to its second and third reading. Submitted by the Committee on Education. Mr. Presiding Officer, may I move then for the approval, adoption and approval of the said committee report, and for the approval of the said resolution without passing to its second and third reading, Mr. Presiding Officer.
Do I hear?
I
second.
the motion, Mr. Presiding Officer.
Okay. Motion duly seconded. The proposed measure is hereby the committee report is hereby adopted and approved, and the proposed measure is approved without passing the second and third reading. Next, we're done with the presentation of committee reports. We can now proceed then to our calendar of business. First is unfinished business. This pertains to 2 items laid on the table. We skip with letter A, considering it will remain, no? If there's no objection, since the
Mr. Presiding Officer.
okay, Barangay President.
In behalf of the Committee on Tourism, this proposed measure is laid on the table, and the committee hearing will be on Thursday at 9 o'clock in the morning.
Okay, the members kindly take note of that.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer.
Letter B. This pertains to the application of Mr. Fenol.
Since the applicant has yet to complete the requirements, Mr. Presiding Officer, I move that this proposed measure be laid on the table.
Okay. Can we perhaps, noted, the proposed measure is laid on the table. Probably for, in the future, perhaps we can make a guideline, no, as part of our internal rules, that if two measures have been laid on the table for at least two consecutive sessions, that it be archived? Yes, Sangguniang Bayan Burgos. Do we have a rule like that?
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer. Well, if a certain measure is not treated after 1 month, then the measure will be archived or to be applied away.
Thank you for that clarification, SBM Burgos. So, as to letter A and letter B, do we have we reached the 1 month period? Not yet. Not yet. Item number 2.
For the measure, Mr. Presiding Officer, we are coordinating with the applicant
Okay.
and is submitting some requirements but not yet complete, Mr. Presiding Officer.
Oh. So there's an effort on the
Yes,
part of
there's
the
an
applicant.
effort for the applicant.
Okay, pero kindly inform him, kindly inform the applicant, no? If he fails to complete the requirement, I think it would be better, no? So as not to clog our our order of business, to withdraw his request until such time that he can complete all of the requirements. Okay. We can proceed then to our unassigned business, number 4. Ano? Yeah. Number 4, measures on third reading. This pertains to the Lisel Ordinance. Okay. We are now in the third and final reading of the proposed measure, an ordinance establishing the Community Mental Health Care Service of Santa Ilocos Sur, providing the mechanisms and guidelines for its implementation, appropriating funds thereof, and for other purposes. We are now in the third and final reading. Do we have any amendments on the title of the proposed measure? Hearing no amendments, what's the pleasure of the Sangguniang Bayan?
Mr. Presiding Officer.
SBM Borge, you are recognized.
There's no amendment on the title, Mr. Presiding Officer. I move for the approval of this proposed measure in its third and final reading, Mr. Presiding
Do
Officer.
I hear a second? Those who approve those who support the approval of the proposed measure, please raise your right hand. Your vote? Okay. All members of the Sangguniang Bayan raise their hands, signifying their support for the passage of the proposed measure, the Lisel Ordinance. Thank you very much. The ordinance is hereby approved. Okay. Agisam ni gayam kong alisalin. Okay. We are now, okay, we're done with our calendar business. Do we have any announcements from the members of the Sangguniang Bayan? Announcements? None? I have no announcements from my table. So, if there are no more announcements or any items for discussion or, yeah, if there's no objection from the member, do you have an announcement, Madam Secretary? None? Because you suddenly looked at me. Naligo ako kaya mukha kong gwapo. Okay. If there's no objection from the members of the Sangguniang Bayan, I would like to declare this regular session adjourned. Session adjourned. Good morning.